Although Brothers Grimm collection of fairy tales have somehow the same cliché of plot, setting, and characters, in the fairy tale of Shrek, the protagonist doesn't follow this cliché. Shrek the protagonist is not a classical fairy tale of the handsome prince in quest of a beautiful princess. Instead, he is an ogre. Grimm brothers wrote on texts that they collected from the words of mouth, giving the traditional tales a special structure and characters. However, compared to Grimm brothers' tales, Shrek the film has a completely different structure and characters. In this paper, I try to disclose the fact that Grimm folk tales, which reveal the mentality of the 19th century, as well as that of the earlier ages, that belong to specific cultures, especially to the European culture and their mentality, are completely different than that of Shrek the film. Keywords: Shrek, Brothers Grimm, traditional, protagonist, folk tales, animation. Introduction. Traditionally, fairy tales were told orally and handed down from one generation to another by the word of mouth until the 19th century, when they developed into written texts. Later, they presented them with special effects in the film genre. The first collectors of fairy tales in an attempt to preserve them were Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, known under the name of Brothers Grimm. Their first edition of folk tales, which appeared in 1812, remains a treasure for folklorists. Weston Hugh Auden, the Anglo-American poet and critic, claimed that Grimm's fairy tales rank next to the Bible in 116 literature Armenian Folia Anglistica importance. Auden 2015, 240. However, the extremely important collection of fairy tales has the same cliché of plot, setting, and characters, which the fairy tale of Shrek doesn't follow. As for the plot of Brothers Grimm collection of folk tales, they are culture-specific, because they tell a story true for a certain society and a certain time in the past. In her journal called Tale Spinners, Submerged Voices in Grimm's Fairy Tales, Ruth B. Botteheimer says, "The folk tales, which appeared during the Grimm's lifetime in 7 large and 12 small editions from 1812 to 1856, can be seen as a sourcebook for the mentality not only of the 19th century, but also of former ages." Bottingheim 1982, 141. Thus, Brothers Grimm Fairy Tale Collection reveals the mentality of the 19th century when Brothers Grimm lived, as well as the mentality of the older ages when these fairy tales were created. It is worth mentioning that in Grimm's time and earlier, these tales were read only by European children to teach them moral lessons. However, in the current time, they are read by various people that belong to different social and ethnic groups. For this specific reason, the plot and setting of Shrek, the film, is much more different than those told by Brothers Grimm. A comparative study of the traditional fairy tales and Shrek. In their book Gender and Society, Laurie Baker Sperry and Liz Grauerholtz mention these folk and fairy tales were originally used as primers for relatively affluent European children and served to impart